me too. Duh.
What's Lynn's last name? Gibson.
Gibson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Plan and Zoning meeting of February 15th. Please bear with us. As you can see, there's only two of us here in the hall, and the rest of us are online. We've got at least three. Roy, well, we'll go through the roll call in a moment. Go ahead.
Okay. Ganaway? Here. Gibson? Kepler?
Here.
Sorry. Kepler?
Here.
Ormsby? Satterfield? Stoltenberg?
Here.
Wendland?
Here.
Okay, great. We have a quorum.
Comes Corey.
Satterfield's logging in right now. Corey's logging in right
Okay, we'll give him a moment.
now. You wanna just get him on the roll if you could, Polly.
His name is Satterfield? Is
Corey Satterfield. Yep.
Okay.
Corey, let us know when you're available.
I'm available.
Okay, great. All right, we'll have a quorum, so we'll proceed. Going to get approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the minutes of the meeting of January 18th, 2023.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, those are approved. All right, commission procedures. I don't have the full paragraph to read here, but we're a recommending body to the city council. We deal with site development plans, land use amendments, rezoning. I would ask if you would like to speak when your time comes, if you'd go to the podium in the back and give us your name and your address so we can get that on record. Thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and let Craig get started.
Mr. Chairman, the case before us, the first one is case 23006, and it is at 62nd Street, north of State Street. It is a site development plan. We've got State Street here, means of entry 62nd, and this is the lot in question right here, Lot 3, Bettendorf Industrial Park, 5th Edition. Essentially, you have Valley Drive up here, acting as a boundary, in essence, between the residential and industrial areas. It's been that way since 1972, essentially, when this all was redone in I-2 zoning. And that's what you have throughout this area. This is the lot we're looking at right here. Everything below Valley is I-2. You go to the area up here with the Fox Grove subdivision, that is R2, and then Panorama Park is all single family in nature. The area here, future land use designation for the area is industrial, which would permit the I-2 zoning. And as I mentioned before, Valley Drive has been considered the traditional boundary between the residential and industrial parcels. The area we're looking at tonight is this lot of record, which was a replat done of Bettendorf Industrial Park 2nd Edition. And the entirety of the 5th edition is essentially this area right here. And that was lots 10 through 13 of the 2nd edition. This is the site plan proposal with means of entry right here. This is a paved area with parking coming off of 62nd Street. The building is located right here. We have a 44-foot wide paved and drive parking area to gain access. We also have parking at this time being sufficient for that structure. Of course, everything as it's graduated in will require more amended site plans to do this, and the tree count is sufficient at this time for the locale. This is the potential staging of 8, or I should say, we have 8 other buildings, I believe, that would be placed on this lot. 9, I should say, 9 buildings. This is the current structure we're looking at. But just to give you a heads up that they intend to go forward with additional buildings and then this whole entirety will be paved in the interior. And that'll require an amended site plan, of course, for every staged-in group of structures. Water, gas, and electric primarily are going to be coming off of Valley. We do have a sanitary sewer connection that is stubbed right here. The stormwater essentially is going to be compensated for. We go back here to the outlet here. This is collecting water from other locales so that this area can then release water. This is the area that compensates for the release here freely off of this lot. And this is the way the structure will look, typical of the contractor condos that we've seen. We do have garage and areas in the storage, and then the interior, there will be offices located. As a result of the location of this lot of record, it is entirely contained within the 100-year floodplain. So there will be a requirement for an engineer, the petitioner's engineer, to submit the proper paperwork to elevate the entirety of the lot or the area that is being built out by 2 feet above what is the 100-year floodplain level or the 1% annual flood probability level. Staff would recommend approval based on the fact that this follows the goal C of the comprehensive plan to attract and retain business and an industry. There are 5 conditions listed here regarding stormwater, I should say, or sanitary sewer, the annual chance of flooding and the remediation of the ground to bring it up to a level out of the 100-year floodplain, and then the sanitary sewer easement being sufficient on site. Valley Drive might be considered as a future entryway to this site as it builds out. And then, of course, any other considerations regarding federal, state, and local law. Staff would recommend approval. I would ask, are there any questions?
Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Scott, this is Ann. I do have one question.
Go ahead.
Greg, the Valley Drive entrance, are there criteria that have to be met in order for that to happen? Or is there something established in advance that the developer knows he would need to do in order to be considered for that?
I believe Mr. Morlock, our city engineer, would be able to handle that question.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe there are some potential fire conditions that would require that. At full build out, if you're talking about 9 buildings, a secondary access would be needed. We would line it up with the street directly across, and we would try to limit the width as well in the future, so that way it would not accommodate truck traffic. We would try to just limit it to residential type vehicles, so pickup trucks, nothing larger. But ultimately, yes, that would be the requirement upon full build out.
Okay, so that would be an expectation. Once he gets to that point, he needs to have that.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That makes sense. Thank you.
And it's Roy, while you're addressing that question, just a little more to bootstrap on that, that would be a private drive, right?
Correct. Yeah, there will be no city street access through here.
So would we have any concern about cut-throughs coming in off 62nd, cutting through there to get to Valley Drive, especially with the limited amount of connection points we have between State Street and Valley Drive?
Ultimately, that would be up to the developer to design the parking lot such that it wouldn't be an inconvenience to them if it did happen. Like I said, it's going to be required via fire code.
Okay. And then regarding, and maybe you're the right one to answer the next question, I don't know, but so regarding the grading, the filling, all those kind of things, will the entire lot property be required to be filled when the initial construction is done, or can it be filled and graded in stages as it's developed in stages?
Ultimately, Greg or Taylor, that would be a floodplain question.
It'd be, yeah, I mean, they'd have to secure that each structure is built, and I believe Taylor could elaborate on that, but I believe they're a two-step process almost, one initially for the fill, and then is there one after the structure is built to certify that it meets the elevation requirement.
Taylor here. Anything in the floodplain, any development requires a local permit, and that would need to ensure that any fill, excavation, or buildings don't raise the floodplain significantly for the buildings. If it is in the floodplain, they would need to meet our minimum 2 foot above base flood elevation. I will note it's currently in the floodplain, but there are some future maps coming out that might change this area. There are currently preliminary maps that have been issued by FEMA. So in May this year, there'll be some updates to this area. We don't have those before you the second, but those are all considerations.
So if I understand Roy's question, what he's asking, are they going to have to go through this process for each building if they don't do it all at once? Would that be?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Can I jump in, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman? I think there's two questions. Every building will need a site development plan. So if they're gonna bring other buildings into this site, they'll need site development plans. They're gonna have to have floodplain development plans that are approved as well. I think the question, and I don't know that staff can answer this, is will it be final graded all at once, or is he gonna incrementally grade the property? And I think that's up to the builder if he's gonna do that.
Yep, that's where I was going, Mark. You said it better. Yep.
I think you're about to get your answer, Roy.
And the other question I've got along that is, how is the water being conveyed, stormwater? Is there an easement for stormwater conveyance? How will the water get to the detention area? And is that detention area calculated to handle this much non-permeable surface as it's ultimately going to be paved?
Yeah, so I'll answer the detention question first, Roy. What Greg mentioned during his presentation is when this subdivision was built, the area in the northeast corner that he's circling, if you can see, is a very low-lying area, and because of the overall topography, what was agreed upon was that they're actually providing compensatory detention, so they are detaining for water that's coming off-site to an equal requirement that what would be done on-site, because of the terrain, there was no way to provide detention. There would just be no way to get that water to the detention basin and then outlet that into ultimately the 67 ditch. So generally speaking, the way stormwater detention would work is water that's generated off-site that we call pass-through is not required to be detained. You literally pass that through your basin and you only store the increase that's on your site. So in this particular subdivision that was, approved in, I think this was 2017 maybe, what we agreed to is they're actually detaining the water that's coming undetained down from the hill and then releasing that through their subdivision, and their water gets undetained. It's still the same rate leaving the subdivision. They're just kind of doing it in reverse.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Yeah, hi, Chris Townsend Engineering. I'll answer the question about the dirt moving. Actually, the owner of this lot is an excavation contractor, so that's pretty helpful. So he will actually grade the entire lot, and really, majority of this lot is actually above the floodplain already. So we're in pretty good shape to begin with, but he'll take care of the entire thing right away. And then we will have to submit for future buildings depending on how they land, so.
Chris, it's Roy. Will that be stabilized then with grass or something then, once
Yeah.
it's graded?
Yes,
Okay.
yep, he has to. So he does this every day, so they're pretty good at it.
All right, thanks.
But
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Anyone in the audience that might have a question? Okay. Seeing none. Anyone want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll move to approve case 23-006, subject to staff recommendations.
Second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I think we're doing a switch here, yeah.
What's that? I'll do my own slide. Yeah.
Hang on just a second. I've seen a few people come in, just in case you're not already aware. The Devil's Glen Forest Grove agenda item has been deferred. So just in case you came in for that, it's been deferred.
Until when?
I'm not sure. Do we have a date on that?
Right now till March 15th.
Okay.
Would be the
The
next
earliest would be
convenient
March 15th. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Next case before you is 23-011. This is a site plan modification for 6125 Valley Drive. This site is located east of the previous case, also along Valley Drive. This is a review of existing infrastructure development. The site, the applicant is owned by Jeff Hartman, who's doing business as Yard Sign Ninjas. The current use is a industrial sign manufacturing business. Some recent additions and over time, accumulation of these additions have increased the size of the development to require a site plan review. We do have, per code, we allow slight minor modifications that are either under 10% of the floor area or intensity. We have some discretion there. And staff felt that there was enough changes that this would require a site plan review to be reviewed by this commission and then approved by city council. So the site is shown on the map, Valley Drive. It's in just north of Centennial Court with no access to Centennial Court. And as mentioned, it's an industrial sign manufacturing business. This location is in the I-2 General Industrial District. To the north of Valley Drive, there's single-family residential. And then the surrounding properties south of Valley Drive are also in the same industrial district. The proposed site plan, or the site plan that identifies all existing infrastructure, so that's what we're looking at, and seeing if that meets our code and making sure everything is in compliance, is shown before you. The original building was built in 1980, and that is shown here. Subsequently, there was additions, and some were, we had a storage area that was just outdoor that was enclosed, and then some offices, a hoop barn, which was for storage located down here, was built in the 2000s. So we have some added additions that were implemented. Parking area, loading docks are all located to the rear, and those aren't proposed to change. And then the parking for employees and limited customers is located off of Valley Drive, and it's accessed via a curb cut, which also isn't changing. There has been some additional development, non-structural, which includes some filling of floodplain. There is floodplain back here. Also some changes and some fill being moved around on the exterior of the property. So that's all included in the site plan review. Those also have to be, as mentioned in the previous case, local permits have to be pulled for floodplain development permits, COSESCO permits for all the fill, you're having bare dirt being moved. So those all have been submitted and reviewed. As noted, currently, this is the current floodplain in the area. A lot of the site is located in that our 100-year regulated floodplain. I will note, and they have they are in compliance now with that by submitting those permits. I will note, though, FEMA has issued preliminary maps, so in May, this site will change a lot, and I can go back and forth to kind of show you a lot of the floodplains being removed from the area. Was conducted, an urban study was conducted just of the urban creeks in the Quad City area, and some significant changes have occurred, and this is due to some sites being filled. So JJZ, second edition, all those lots off Centennial Court, they went through the process to fill in the floodplain and then received, which is called a letter of map amendment from FEMA, which removes that site from the floodplain. So you notice all those are gone. And then the area in question, the floodplain has been significantly reduced, or the base flood elevation. Looks like it's shown it right around 578 here. So there is some 500-year floodplain still on site. Our code mostly does not regulate that zone of floodplain, just for some particular uses. So that will not become effective till May. So that's just kind of looking forward. This is the current law, and this is what we are enforcing now. And the developer, or the owner, has complied and submitted all documentation. So they are in compliance with that. As for any other analysis, increased traffic, staff had notes there's not, due to the increase in building space and storage, there won't be a noted increase in traffic. So parking is sufficient for the area as shown. The access is not changing. So this is what's there now, and what's been there for the past year at least, is what you're going to see. Products are going to be, from what staff has been told, are going to be the same. There is some renovations occurring inside the building that will move for the industrial process around, but that will not affect the overall site for this review. With that, staff has looked at from all angles and agrees that this does meet our code for site development and for the industrial area, and recommends approval for this modification to site plan for 6125 Valley Drive. Staff will note any future modifications, major modifications, will require further review by this body, and I can take any questions.
Any questions from anyone?
So Taylor, the note I wrote when I was going through this is essentially an after the fact action. So these changes were made without the requisite site plan or other reviews when they were done.
That is correct. And the process, would be, and if that happens, would be to stop everything and make sure all the proper, either if it's permits, building permits, floodplain permits, to get the property into compliance. And this is one step of that journey. And that's what's before you. Yeah.
Was all that work done under the same ownership or multiple ownerships?
I believe the owner has owned this property since 2012. So some of this could have happened prior to that, and in fact did. And it's hard when there's incremental additions added over time, do 5 minor modifications, and they kind of go under the radar. And staff felt that there was enough modifications to this site that it did require a review by this commission and then council.
So just
Yeah,
to
good.
add, Mr. Chairman, just to add some clarity here. The way this comes to light for us is when we prepare for our review by the Iowa DNR of our floodplain management process, which they come in and audit us. In doing that, we were doing some field work and came across this site and realized that some things had occurred that probably hadn't been fully reviewed by the city, and we were able to work with the site owner and their engineer to get things back to good and get an approved site development plan and improved floodplain permits, which we need to maintain the city's floodplain management status.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So just to confirm that there are no structures that have been added that are below requisite flood elevation limits.
This site does meet flood requirements. Not all buildings are required to be, it depends on the particular use for that building. So a storage building, for instance, if it's in the floodway fringe, would not, and it has materials that aren't hazardous, or there's a litany of criteria that you are allowed to have that in the floodplain. But the main building, all the engineer they took base elevations, floor elevations, and have submitted all that information, and it does comply with our code, which is adopted out of the model Iowa floodplain code, so it does meet all those requirements.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Any other questions? Anyone in the audience wish to address this issue? Okay, seeing none.
I'll move to approve case 23-011, subject to staff recommendations.
Roy will second that.
All right. With that, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Just a second to prepare.
Okay.
Ready when you are, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed.
I have case 22-097. This is at 3150 Glenbrook Circle South. It's a major site development plan change, so we're looking at the site development plan that was approved by this body or recommend for approval by this body and approved by City Council previously at a change to that location. There's a lot to unpack in this case, so it might be a little longer than my normal presentation, so please indulge me. I'm going to try and throw a lot at you in a little bit of time. So just get the basic facts out of the way. We have applicant Nelson Construction and Development. The request is that major change to a site development plan. Going back to our previous case, when you change the intensity or change the use, make more than a 10% footprint change, other similar type of actions would cause a site development plan to have a relook or a change or modification approved through the city process, which includes a recommendation by this body and then an approval by City Council. This location is presently a senior living facility known as the Quartet. The proposed change would take out about a 3-acre stormwater and open space, so that is right here. Let's see, if you're looking at the screen, I don't know if the folks at home or on Zoom are seeing that, but it would
Yep.
take that, thank you, it would take that 3.8 acres out, and there would be a future proposed development on that space. It's kind of important to note today that we're going to talk a lot about the site development plan at Glenbrook Circle, but we only have conceptual plans for what might occur there. So when I say there, at the 3-acre spot. So we're going to talk about taking this 3 acres away from the site development plan that's approved for Glenbrook Circle, or I'm sorry, for 3150, the Quartet, and then we'll have some conceptual ideas of what's going on maybe in the future should that change occur. But really the change is, are we okay with taking the 3.08 acres out? If we're okay with that, then we could go further down the road and have a site development plan come forward for that acreage. A little more background, it's zoned urban medium intensity. This is a development character area zoning classification. The original concept had a smaller senior living site. This is the senior living site in question here. It was smaller in the beginning. That has changed through some site development plans and replats that have come through this body. And those changes have kind of been incremental in nature. So the whole site, if you want to go back here, and I'll show you this a couple times, the original concept is this drawing here. And that whole site over time has had some incremental changes. Remember, it is part of a development character area, so that whole zoning district takes into account what will be developed within all of that area and how it might interact and play with each other. And just to give you a little bit of a timeline, and kind of refresh your memory on when you saw this case and how it looked the different times when you saw it. So when it first came before this body, it was a rezoning to create this UMI, urban medium intensity development character area. That was back in 2018. The case numbers were 96 and 97, 1896 and 1897. And that was reviewed by this body and recommended positively and subsequently approved by City Council. So it was before this body on December 19th of 2018. Came back again for a site development plan for the quartet specifically to start the building process after the rezoning. And that was December 18 of 19. Those numbers are oddly similar, but it's really not that odd because of the way the dates fall on the calendar. And then in 2020, we saw a replat that brought this whole lot, I'm gonna try and draw it for you here, but this whole area into one lot of record. And that incurred is case 22-005. I will note on this plat that there are a few things that I think you should be aware of relative to this plat. And I'll just zoom in here for a second to show you what those are. Lot 2, which is the lot in question, is designated as detention area. And then Lot F is just to the east of that is designated as green space. So you have a detention area and a dedicated green space next to each other as platted, and that's reflected in the plat notes. Out Lot F for common space is note 3. And then just to show you in map format that future land use and zoning, future land use is urban medium intensity, and the current zoning is also urban medium intensity. Those are slightly different concepts, but the case being made here is they align, right? So we have alignment with our zoning, we have alignment with our future land use map. That's not an issue. Background out of the way, let's talk about how we do this analysis. And our code is very specific on how we do site plan change analysis for development character areas. Again, we're looking at this from a holistic view and from a site view. We have the development character area, that is all of the Glenbrook subdivision, and you have the specific sites within. And so you're kind of playing those two concepts back and forth with each other. Step 1 is an analysis of the permitted uses and intensity. The use that is existing, the senior development or senior living center, is a permitted use. And it would appear that the proposed use is also a permitted use, since it would be from the same company and be another style or type of senior living. So permitted use is not an issue. So the impacts of the removal on the intensity side of this question, look at how many units per acre. So it's kind of a simple math thing here. If you have X units per acre and you reduce that acreage by taking a lot out or 2 lots out of that site development, you increase the number of lots per acre, just again, simple math. So the quartet currently has roughly 120 units on 11.4 acres. That would change to 120 units on 8.3 acres. So you shouldn't be surprised that there's an increase in the units per acre just by doing so. That's about a 37% increase. And if you want to see that in units per acre, it's 10.54 currently to 14.46. Again, just by taking out that 3 acres. We're not talking about what would come on that 3 acres yet. Conceptually, you can see there's roughly a 3-story building with maybe approximately 100 units, but we haven't really done that specific analysis as we want to look at the current change to the site development plan at 3150. I would note that 17 units per acre are allowed per code, so these changes are still within code. Even if you were to agree to take this 3 acres out, the quartet would still have enough units per acre, and I did already note that the use is allowed. The next part of our analysis, step 2, if you will, is a bit of a frontage. So we have within the development character areas the ability to kind of design the lots and some design standards relative to those lots. And one of the things they want to have is frontages and depths that kind of match. So you have kind of roughly equal distance from the depth of the lot relative to the frontage of the lot on a road. And as previously presented, this lot had frontage here and frontage here, and a depth of, whatever this deepest part is. But those were roughly symmetrical. They were about the same. If you were to take this out, and now your frontage is limited to roughly this. So your frontage characteristic is much narrower, and your depth stays the same. What that's getting to is really flag lots. We're trying not to develop a bunch of flag lots in our DCAs as a design aesthetic, and also just probably as an access transportation issue. So DCAs were kind of designed to avoid that. This does, in fact, create more of a flag lot by removing that 3.8 acres. Probably not a huge impact when it comes to the actual circulation, because when they were, or if they were to take out the 3 acres, it doesn't remove any of their allowed parking or required parking. So that doesn't change, and the access as far as driving in on Glenbrook Circle South would still be there. But that doesn't provide for whatever parking and whatever circulation might be caused by this use. Again, we're not really doing that analysis yet today. We'll do that at a later date if the case does move forward. I want to correct one error in my staff report. I think I mentioned the dog park was going to be impacted. I will retract that. The dog park is presently located here. It's shown in this photo, and it looks like that wouldn't be impacted, at least from just the plain view, inspection view, if you will. So I would like to just clarify that. And then now we're going to talk more about location and design. Again, development character areas give us as a city a lot more ability to implement and create or impact the design of a subdivision. And our code reads, and it's on the screen for you, but I'm gonna read it for you or to you. Landscaping should be integral to the development, providing street landscaping, breaks in uninterrupted paved areas, and buffering where required by surrounding land uses. Parts of sites with sensitive environmental features and natural drainages should be preserved. We think the proposal falls short in this area, and I'll point out kind of why. The drainage obviously has to change. Now, they might be able to do that from an engineering standpoint. It's probably possible, but the drainage would change. And so would the landscaping, and you're seeing some of that landscaping in these photos. There would possibly be landscaping impacts there, and also required landscaping on this frontage. And a lot of these you can't see very well, but there are lots of little trees planted. Now, they've just been planted, so they're not fully grown yet, but at maturity, those trees provided shade and buffering for those townhomes. I think we talked about stormwater management. There would be an impact of stormwater management. My understanding from talking with city engineers that, pretty much anything's possible with this much space. You could probably make stormwater work. You would do something underground or something deeper as far as a retention area. And we would have to do a formal stormwater analysis on the site development plan that came forward in the future. Step 3, kind of proud of this slide. This was hard to put together. Step 3 is really about compatibility. In a DCA, we've created an overall character. So this whole subdivision should be viewed wholly. While we do have individual site development plans, those should always refer back to the original concept. That is the point of a DCA. And so, regardless of what's built, whether you look at the original concept, I would just point out why we're here, how much we've changed from original concept in intensity of this use. I would also point out that certain items of green space have kind of moved around this plan. In some areas, they were behind the quartet. When the quartet grew, they seemed to migrate over to this direction. Regardless of what happens here today, if we allow development to occur on the 3.08 acres, there will be some loss of green space and buffering and landscaping. The exact percentage of that or scale of that is really dependent on what's built. Here's the concept of what they would build. Again, that hasn't been formally reviewed by the city, but that's what they're showing as their proposal if they get access to the 3.8 acres by removing it from the required site development plan for the quartet. There's another issue that comes into design character areas or development character areas, is we have within codes kind of desired percentages of how these things should be built out. Housing mix as a guide from our code, the desired mix is 30 to 50% single-family home, 20 to 25% attached homes, and 20 to 35% multifamily. We're already above that. We're in the 80% range of multifamily right now. And that, of course, would increase if this were to occur. So I think we'd be even more lopsided or even more out of scale with our own code should we progress to a site development plan as presented under the concept here. Oops, let me go back here. Sorry, guys. So staff's recommendation, I have a quick flyover video I want to show you guys too, to give you a little bit better understanding of this site. Staff recommendation right now is denial for case 22-097. We think the major site development plan change would result in an increase in intensity that's incompatible with the DCA plan. We think it creates a lot frontage that does not meet the design standards of a UMI DCA, and would have a negative impact on green space and landscaping. That was integral into the creation of the plan. If you remember, that first plan had kind of the fountain water feature. That seemed to me to kind of have migrated, maybe not to be a fountain and a water feature anymore, but that green space, if you will, migrated to become what is lot 3, or what is the 3-acre lot. I think it's lot 2. Sorry for the lot number mix up. So we think that's a kind of a negative impact. And then we think we're going to increase the imbalance of the desired housing mix beyond what we've already allowed to occur. In preparing for today's meeting, I did have a chance to use the city's drone footage to kind of get a flyover, bird's eye view, whatever term you want to use. First time I've ever done this. I hope it works. I hope you're able to view it at home. But I would like you to just kind of get a flyover view of this. Fingers crossed. So you're looking to the north, west, basically right now. Come on, computer.
Actually good. When it pauses there, we get a little bit of a view.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Just like we drew it up. So the site is really coming onto the screen right now. I had no idea why it's pausing. The site is
But I
coming
like
into
that. Can you pause it just there? Hit the pause for a minute?
I can. Wonderful.
Yeah, just let everybody absorb kind of what's going on. Because one of my comments, it's Roy on the record, is we've got a lot of intensity and large buildings on the east side. We've got the large building on the west side, and we have this open area in the middle. And I just want to be able to get a good view of the density and impact. And the ones that we see with the green siding now, or weather stripping, whatever it is, are those townhouses? Are those 4-unit townhouses? Are those rentals or condos?
Yeah, as far as the exact ownership, I can't tell you. That's going to be up to the individual developer. But those are townhouse style. There's also townhouses you can see in the image here. I don't know what I'm going to do if I can draw on that. Those are existing occupied townhouses. I think those are also all rentals, or mostly rentals. And then in the foreground are 2 apartment buildings, the closest thing in the foreground, which are completely rental apartment buildings. We do have some single families off kind of in the background. Several of those are already built, and there's a few more that could still come in. So this area is single family. This area is townhome. These are townhomes, apartment building, kind of an office, leasing office, site office, if you will, and then single family homes continuing through. And I think there's a couple lots, 2 or 3, not many left. And then a cul-de-sac up here. Let's see if I can get video to play. So now you're kind of really getting into the actual location of the site and the existing drainage. You can see some of the landscaping just kind of coming into effect with the pine trees and things like that, but it really hasn't taken hold yet, and it shouldn't have. They've really only started. There's the dog park. I missed that one. The dog park is there. I'm not sure why I'm paused again, but I just want to point out also just the relation of height of building and shadowing. So if I could pause. This is taken 2 days ago at roughly 3:15, 3:30 in the afternoon. And the shadowing from the 3-story building here, if there were some development to occur, I would have some concern, again, in development character area, about creating shadowing on these single-family homes that are kind of in this, or I'm sorry, townhomes that are kind of in the center of your screen here. If you were to have a structure of the same height, south-facing, you would be creating pretty long shadows for a large portion of the day, depending on how high the sun is and all that stuff. But just something I would have some concern about.
Did you say those are rentals?
I believe these are mostly rentals. There may be a mix of some owned and some rented. And just a few more seconds left here. I think that, there might be 5 seconds left, but there's not really much to add after this. So a new tool we're going to try and use. Hopefully it was successful here today and give you a little better understanding of the perspective of this case. I would add that we did have one letter recommending denial of this case from a resident that's been put into the correspondence file, and it was also sent to the commissioners as well. But that letter did come out against the case being approved. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right. Any questions?
Mark, this is Ann. I have a couple questions. First of all, I really appreciated having that drone footage. That was a really nice enhancement. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll thank the drone pilot. It's not done by me. I'm not qualified to do something quite that technologically advanced, but I will let the right person know.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for us to have and all see it together at the same time.
Thank
That's
you.
good. Thank you. When you showed us the concept drawings, and we've looked at a lot of different things, that area in the northwest corner by the cul-de-sac,
Mhm.
would I consider that a green space? Are there plans to build more houses there or do more development? Is there, what is the long-term plan for that?
Yeah, so one of the things I did in preparing for today's case is I went back and listened to the case where the site development plan was brought forward for the quartet. And there was a lot of talk, and you can listen to this online too if you want to. It's just, if you go to the more button under that particular case in that particular day, you can get to the audio link. There was a lot of talk about this site development plan having taken a year to mature, and that they had neighborhood meetings and the quartet worked with the neighborhood. A lot of the neighbors to the northwest, to that corner, were concerned about buffering and landscaping. And while I, of course, wasn't there because I wasn't employed by the city at that time, it sounded like, if I may, that the intent was to leave that open and green space to buffer against that neighborhood.
Okay. And the pictures that you just showed us from the drone,
Mm-hmm.
if this lot 2 were not being developed, that 3.08 acres was going to remain, do you feel that is the end result, what we just saw? Would that be how they would finish that green space? Or is that just kind of a leftover portion that hasn't been finished up yet?
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand the question. So you're asking me, the 3.08 acres, is it in a finished state at this time?
Correct.
It's
Correct.
not. I would point out that they still have their silt fencing up. The drainage area probably needs some cleaning out because it didn't look like it was actually working. It was a little too filled in. Those are all normal maintenance things. That's not really a criticism, but I would not say it's complete.
Okay.
And also they haven't had a chance, Nelson has not had a chance to have their landscaping take hold. So while you didn't see a lot of landscaping there, that should not be seen as a criticism of Nelson. It's just at this time in the development, it wouldn't
Sure.
be very far along.
That makes sense. So the screen that you have up right now, when I look at, I'll say the initial plan that we considered versus the current one, am I seeing, when I move from the left-hand picture to the right-hand picture, am I seeing a 37% increase in units per acre?
So if you were to, let's look at this picture right here.
Okay,
Right now, this whole area is the total number of acres that go into that math problem, that division problem for total
Okay.
units per acre. If you
Okay.
decide that this unit per acre calculation no longer includes this piece, you automatically, I mean, this is like arithmetic at this point, you automatically increase the units per acre just because you've taken that out of the denominator, right?
Sure. Right.
So that's all I'm saying. I have not
Okay.
contemplated formally how many units per acre are added if you add this. I'm going to say roughly there's 100 units there. I could be a little bit off. But again, I have not done a formal analysis on that in any real way. No.
And what I'm looking at just this evening is looking at that picture to the far left and the number of apartment buildings and the number of townhouses. And
So
I mean, I can't do that math in my head, but that looks fairly dense to me.
yeah, I mean, I think we want to be honest here about what we've done. We as a city, and I think with full knowledge, allowed this piece to grow
Right.
because these apartment buildings were becoming townhomes. You know, to me, that's the math that took place. Again, I wasn't there, so I'm reading through minutes and listening to recordings. But that's the math problem that took place. We want to grow the quartet, and we had this overall DCA plan. How do we make that work and stay within the integrity of the plan? And we said, well, a couple of these
Right.
apartment buildings are going to go away. Actually, more than a couple. Those all went away. So they got some credit for that, if you will, and when they got to expand this. That
Right.
was a decision
Yeah.
made by others, but I think that's what occurred.
Well, I think from where I'm sitting today, we've talked about these DCAs and we really embrace that as an important part of our comprehensive plan. And we have some examples and they have worked well. But when I look at this project, I see it almost feels like continual change to me. Over quite a few, we're at 5 years now. We're on quite a few different versions and it seems to continue to move. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm feeling from your comments tonight, Mark, that maybe it's not the best thing. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. I'm going to jump in here for just a moment. As I look at what's on the screen now, it definitely looks like we're going to a very intense usage, too intense. As we looked at the drone footage, I see a very large open space that looks empty, like it should have something there. So to me, there's something that needs to be in the middle of a 3-story building and something that fills that space a little bit. Another potential problem I see with this, that we have a lot of cases that come in front of us where we have lots that are land use and even zoning where something is zoned commercial, but nothing's been built for years and the housing around it builds up. And everyone should have known that there would be a commercial building of some kind on those lots. So when that happens to come up, we have to go through the process of convincing everyone that, hey, you should have known this ahead of time. There was going to be a commercial building. I see this as the opposite, though. Whether these are rental townhomes or owned townhomes, when those were built, when people either bought them or whoever built them that's renting them put them up, what they saw was an empty lot that was supposed to stay an empty lot. So now we're wanting to put a 3-story building there, which then puts a shadow there, increases the density, many other things that don't quite sit well with me. So for me to feel comfortable approving something like this, I would have to see a plan come forward that's not a 3-story building, that the density is considerably less and would be aesthetically pleasing. Now, there's no real question in there anywhere, a statement. So with that, I will see if any other commissioners have any questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman, it's Roy. I would concur with your observation, and I think it's a good analogy, Scott, of how this one's kind of backwards from how we usually encounter it. And, you know, to your point, I think it's a valid one, whether a tenant or an owner or whatever, what was a record is not what's being proposed now, and that's a change. It does feel when you look at that aerial that there is kind of a hole there, an open space, literally a hole. So it's not unnatural to have something there, but we also, and I remember this, the multiple facets of this case over many meetings and a lot of comment and angst from the people to the north. And I'll touch back on that for a second too, that the buffers were negotiated up there and it's called conservation area, but it's a slope, it's a big hill. You can't functionally use any of it. You can call it conservation, but it's all slope and steep grade back there. So, but it is some buffer, but that was buffered to provide a softening of the overall development and view of the intensity that was proposed down below. And part of that intensity was mitigated or softened by virtue of having some of that open space. And for us to turn around now and say, oh, hey, let's fill in it. There's a space that should be filled in. I think when we take it in full context and historical perspective, there was an intent to have it kind of lay out, have some open spaces to provide for multiple uses and soften the density and impact of some pretty large buildings on the southeast and southwest side of the lot. So I would want to see, similar to your comment, something of a much smaller intensity to drop another 3 or 4 story building kind of edge to edge in there. Doesn't feel like we're meeting the spirit or perspective of what we originally agreed to between all of us.
I would point out that the staff report alludes to some of these same concerns. On the last page, we talk about the intent of the DCA, and while I have to review what's presented to me, there is language that talks about if the concept plan were somehow less dense, staff's analysis, you know, for removing this 3.8 acres might change, but we can only do analysis on what's presented to us.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
In the left plan, the plan at the left there, that water feature, was that ever intended to be detention or retention?
It's a fair question, and I can't answer it. I tried to do that research, historical research. In the meetings that I listened to in preparation for this, I didn't hear that come up specifically. Again, this is a concept plan that was submitted with a rezoning. We understand that concept plans are just that, they're concept plans. So how you want to take that feature being drawn as such, I can't give you an answer if it was required or not.
Okay, I guess
I would assume it was the detention and not just a beautification effort, but I don't know that to be a
Sure.
fact.
So I guess the second part of the question is, the plan in the middle is roughly what we're seeing today, right?
Yep, that's correct.
So is there any retention or detention on the site? I don't see any. Or is there enough pervious surface to be able to make that requirement less onerous on the developer?
I'll let the engineer speak to the detention.
Corey, so the current detention on that middle image that you see is the lot in question.
Okay,
So right where Mark's drawing there is the majority of the detention for the development. There are a couple of smaller ponds that serve the area to the north and a small one to the south that I think is not quite finished either. But that is the largest one, is that open green space.
okay, so one of the aerial plans you have, there's a kind of, looks like a little wet spot that's ultimately gonna be what's gonna be the detention area, I assume.
Yeah,
I
so
think the
that,
concept would move it to the south and make it deeper and maybe underground storage. I don't know.
Okay. So it's not, I guess I missed that part of it completely. It's not that they're completely eliminating it, but it seems to be like, kind of to Ann's point earlier, this feels like there's been a moving target, and they're still operating as though they have the same amount of flexibility that they had initially. But as they fill in their site, that just logically diminishes, right? Because you don't have as much space to be able to make adjustments with. So I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from. It seems like if that's a piece of property that they do want to do something on, there needs to be a little bit more consideration of the overall development that they have, and recognition that they don't have the same flexibility they had when this was greenfield. I'll be quiet now.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
Any other commissioners wishing to comment?
This is Lynn, and I don't really have anything significant to add, except I was happy. I guess I'm in full support of staff's recommendation that we deny this, and I'm quite comfortable with a down vote on this. For many of the reasons my other commissioners just identified. And, there are times where we can't say anything else, but yes, just based on what's in front of us and what's come before us. And this is an opportunity to say no for the right reasons. And as I said, I don't have much to add, except I'm quite comfortable with the down vote.
Thank you. You're fine.
Okay.
Anyone in the audience wish to address us?
Good evening. Brian Belk, Axiom Consultants, here representing the applicant. Nelson is also here in attendance, as well as our attorney, so certainly here to answer any questions you may have or provide any additional information. I just wanted to thank Mark and city staff throughout this process, and just really wanted to focus and maybe actually ask a question to Mark. My understanding is no matter what would go into this lot that we're talking about, infill, whether it's 3-story independent living as proposed or single-story townhomes, the first step here has to happen. Is that correct, Mark? Before anything could be proposed here, no matter what it is of any size?
Yes, sir, that is correct. We have to change the site development plan that's existing before we can plan for development on the new site.
Okay, so even if something was wanting to go in there as infill of smaller density or whatever, this step would have to be approved first? And
Yes, sir.
okay. And then I guess I just also wanted to point out on the original DCI that, that was approved on the left side, as you can see, that the area that's in question that we're talking about consisted of 4 multifamily buildings. When you look back at that, that was estimated at 160 units between those buildings. The proposed, that we're looking at in terms of independent living, I believe is in the 110, 100 to 110 range. So the density actually is decreasing from what was originally approved and is currently the DCA that's in discussion. And it seems to me actually the picture on the right gets you a lot closer to the original picture on the left that we're looking to amend than in the center where there is a giant open space. It is utilized as stormwater management, as you can see from the aerial images. It's not, it's a detention basin. It's not the prettiest thing you'll ever see. It does need some stabilization to, continue to grow, of course, as Mark alluded to. But there is the plan to purchase additional land by Nelson from the current owner to the south, which you can see on the right plan, that would actually try to incorporate some of this trails and open space and park space that was originally intended, that did not get done by the original developer. And on that right side, even add some actual park and a local park space there. Yep, thank you, Mark. So that intent is also there to try to increase and improve the green space and open space, knowing that some of that would be removed with the proposed building. Stormwater management would need to be taken care of, obviously, per code, and would be done so with the site plan, as we discussed. Some of that would be at the surface on the south side of the building, as Mark showed earlier. Some would be underground as well, under the paving. And I guess one other note I'll add is, in addition to those buildings that are originally shown on the plan to the left, that all had surface parking, whereas this new building would have parking within the building and under the building. So visually, that's a little more appealing as well. And I feel that it could get it to look very nice aesthetically on the front of this new building also. Otherwise, yeah, happy to. Well, I guess I'll go back one more thing on the density. I think the original, and I don't have the exact numbers with me, on the assistant living of the building obviously was smaller than was built now, as we know. I think that was 70 units originally, and like I said, 160 multifamily, so 230. And they're now at about 100, 110 on the existing, and another 100, 110 in the next. So you're actually still a little less dense than the original plan with what is being shown as proposed. So we don't feel like that is really out of whack at all by any means, but just getting it closer to what the original approved was. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for him?
Maybe, Mark, just to clarify, of those three drawings, the first one was not the approved, that was a concept plan, right?
Yeah, that was the concept plan that created the DCA, the Design Development Character Area. So it's that I guess, is it an approved drawing? Yes, it's approved as part of the conceptual drawing that accompanied that case, that rezoning case. There was actually two cases that came forward. So that was reviewed and approved by the city as part of that UMI DCA rezoning.
But that was the concept plan,
Mhm.
right?
It's
Not-
as the concept plan,
Wasn't a site plan.
not the
It wasn't
site
a
plan.
site-
And then
Okay.
subsequent site plans came in, and we refer, as those site plans come in, we refer back to the original DCA plan and, kind of make the judgment call. Well, does it fit the overall DCA plan or not? Which is really the same process we're kind of doing here today. Does taking the 3.808 acres out and potentially developing it as something else, does that still fit with the DCA? In doing that, you got to look at what's coming forward. So you got to look at this and also the impact of just having this not be part of this site.
What was the original DCA in the left picture? Was that the entire site? Or was it the more dog-like shape? Was it?
So the entire subdivision was one development character area. So
Okay.
So this whole
Yeah.
thing was a development character area, and in whole was evaluated based on this concept plan, and then subsequent, over time, individual site development plans come through. You look at those site development plans, you make a judgment call based on the conceptual plan on the left-hand side of this page.
And now we're looking at a subset of that area.
Yep, you're looking at at this site development plan that you approved,
Yep.
you approved with, and my boundaries aren't perfect there. You approved this increase in the quartet, and you approved it with the boundaries shown here, and those boundaries included that acreage. It seems to me there's a lot of conversation, and if I'm overstepping, excuse me, I think there's a lot of conversation about how we go from having this be just a completely open space to being something that's almost a completely filled space, and is there room in between? That's something staff would be happy to do an analysis on. We don't have that presented to us, but we could do that analysis if it were presented to us.
I think we also have to look at, it was mentioned, the other areas to the south. If those were added to the current ownership, then that changes your numbers.
It does change a mathematical number, but it doesn't change the overall DCA boundaries because your DCA boundary hasn't changed. You know, you're not buying this ground and adding it to the site, which was not part of the DCA. You would be buying ground that was already part and already considered in the DCA and designated as floodway or floodplain.
And it doesn't change the aesthetics of a 3-story building versus
Right.
an open lot or
Yeah.
something in between.
I guess I want to be careful about doing too much analysis on the fly here because
Sure. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Brett Marshall, I'm the attorney for the applicant here. And I want to point out to the commission, I don't want us to get lost in what's not before the commission. That is what may or may not be built on Lot 2, which is the current drainage lot. That's not what's before the commission tonight. What's before the commission is the proposal to remove that as open space. And whether or not removing that lot as open space could be compatible with the DCA. That's the question that the commission needs to answer. And I think we have a clear answer to that. If you look at the original DCA, that lot was originally contemplated as having 4 multifamily buildings on it. I think the staff report also mentions that development on that property could be compatible with the DCA, and it suggests, for example, putting townhomes or single-family residential homes on that property. So the question has been answered. Can we get rid of that green space or decrease that green space on Lot 2? Yes. And can we do that and have it be compatible with the DCA? Yes, we can. So that's what's before the commission. Not, are we gonna put a 3-story building on there? Or are we gonna put townhomes on there? We just need to consider tonight whether or not we can remove that green space, and then if we can put something on it that would keep that lot compatible with the DCA. That's the question. And I don't want us to get lost in, and I know a lot of it's been talked about, what's gonna happen on that lot after the fact, but that's not before the commission. The last thing I'd just like to point out, there were some comments by some of the commissioners about, it seems like this is kind of messy and always changing. Well, that's the nature of DCAs. They are always changing. And that's one of the benefits, I guess you could consider that a detriment of a DCA as well, is that it's fuzzy, and you get to decide as a commission and as a city council about what is compatible within the DCA. I just want to point out a couple things that your code says about evaluating the uses in a DCA. So in considering the range of permitted uses, and this takes into account intensity and all these other things, the pattern of development that has occurred in the DCA and other characteristics of the subject property are considered to make a determination regarding a request for an amendment change. Again, the pattern of development. I understand that the site plan that was submitted and approved was different than the concept DCA, but the site plan that was approved is the pattern of development that has occurred within the DCA that the city approved. So then we get to the next question, okay, well then does further development on Lot 2, given the pattern of development in the DCA that the city has approved, Can that be consistent with the DCA? And here's some other things regarding open space and intensity and things that seem to be a concern with the removal of that as open space. Here's what the DCA says about that. Compatibility in multi-use districts can be attained in a more nuanced way by focusing more on the performance or the effects of various uses and designing regulations that allow for more integration of uses. If carefully done, the integration of uses can be achieved so that commute times become shorter, neighborhoods become more walkable and interesting, all while preserving privacy, security, and aesthetics. And here's, I think, the important part. The DCAs described in this title exist on a continuum of intensity and therefore have a continuum of compatibility methods. So it's not like typical zoning where here's what the zoning says can happen, and once the zoning is zoned, that's it, and you have to follow that. No, we're talking about a continuum of compatibility methods that can be determined by the commission and by the city. As DCAs become more intense and uses become more integrated, again, indicating that changes can happen, compatibility methods focus less on spacing and congregating of similar uses and more on performance-based methods that directly address issues such as noise, traffic, air quality, privacy, and aesthetics. So the DCA itself recognizes that within a DCA, it can become more intense than originally contemplated. And the city doesn't have to say, or the commission doesn't have to say, well, that's what we originally contemplated, so we're not going to consider that. The city can say, well, here's how the pattern of development has occurred. Here's what's proposed. How can we design around that? How can we take into consideration noise, traffic, air quality, privacy, and aesthetics that would allow this development to occur? But again, that's the second step in the process. All we're here tonight to do is to decide whether we can remove Lot 2 as green space. And as Brian already mentioned, that has to happen before anything can be developed on Lot 2. So if you want single-family homes, we have to do this. This has to be approved. If you want townhomes, it's got to be approved. Lastly, I'll mention the photograph or the drone flyover that you saw of the drainage basin. That's not far away from what the ultimate finished product will look like. There is no obligation for the planning of to fully landscape that lot. It doesn't exist. Might put a fence around it, might plant some grass to prohibit erosion, things like that, but there is no obligation to make that lot nice, like, say, for example, the landscaping that you have around Lot 1. So if we want something nice there, whether or not it's going to be a 3-story building or what, we have to approve this site plan modification first and then worry about what comes next. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to respond to that. I think part of the problem here is we're already getting a visual for what's coming next. And so that's the part that's tripping us up, is that we aren't just deciding in a lot of ways about this lot. We're deciding based on what seems to be coming. It seems like in often cases, it seems like there's a little bit more conversation with the city to say, here are some suggested uses, or here are some ways that this would be more congruent to what this was intended. And this, so I think that view of the third picture is tripping this process up.
So I'll just address that by saying, so we're following the recommendations of staff, that this is the process that needed to happen first. Obviously, if this is approved, a separate site plan will have to be submitted for Lot 2 and will have to be approved and go through the same process. So again, we are following the recommendation of staff. And I understand, again, that a lot has been, well, here's what we plan to do with the property. But again, we'll have these same conversations when the site plan is submitted on Lot 2, and we'll have to come through the same process. So I don't anticipate that that we're gonna lose anything in this phase. If we approve this and the site plan isn't approved, that lot 2 is still gonna stay the way it is right now. Because the commission has to approve it, and the city has to approve any development on that property anyways.
Mr. Chairman, since we were kind of dealing with some process issues, if I can just give a little bit of my thoughts, because this is a very unique situation. And I think, Mr. Chairman, one of the comments that you made about this being sort of the reverse of some other land use issues that we see is a point well taken, and partly because the site plan that's at issue to be amended it has been approved, and it has been approved with this open space. And so those people that do live in those townhomes might have taken that as more of a real thing than the conceptual purpose statement from the DCA when it first came into play. But I think also your point that when you look at the drone footage, that this does look like a big empty space that could potentially be developed is also a consideration that is sort of apparent when you look at it. And so I think I just want to say that the issues aren't simply approval or denial of this site plan, but there is in code the option to conditionally approve an amendment. And in theory, that could be conditioned on an approved site plan for this area, the open space in question. And there is another kind of, one other potentially, an issue that will have to be addressed is the outlot F that Mark addressed, which is, I think, another pretty major point in the process that will have to be addressed, because that was clearly indicated to be open space, not detention or anything. But I just want to say, I don't think you need to deny in total and just say we're not going to develop that, or say, yes, we will approve this amendment, and they can just bring us something on this lot too. They are tied together, and that's unquestionable to me. So I guess I just want to, we need to consider some of that nuance.
Thank you. And I'm going to say one thing. At the beginning, I said we're a recommending body. We're recommending to the city council based on what we know at this time that we would do. And my perspective on that is they can overrule us if they don't like it. We are, I think you've said it before, a quasi-legal body. We can't make a decision that is the law, so to say. We're just recommending. We can recommend that something fits all of the pieces, but then we're also here to give our opinion on whether it fits conceptually, visually, aesthetically, all of those factors. Too often we find ourselves getting backed into a corner just by approving one process, because it's just it checks all the boxes. You can just approve it and send it right on. This is one of those cases where it's going to be hard for us just to say, oh, it checks all the boxes, let's just move right on. And from my perspective, it doesn't meet all the boxes I have to check. If there was a conception plan that came that we could conditionally say we will approve the site plan along with the conceptual plan of what's going to be done, that's a different story. If this was the conceptual plan of what's being done, I definitely would not approve. I would say no. So based on what I know, it may check certain boxes and fit, but it doesn't fit the conceptual plan or my thought process of what should go there at this time from what I know. So that's kind of where we're at. We understand the legal aspect, but that's up to the city council to overrule us should we decide to go with the city's recommendation and deny. With that, I will see if any other commission members have any comments.
Can I clarify something? If we were to deny this case, it doesn't go to the city, or it still does go to the city?
Yeah, so you want to take that, Chris?
Go
No,
ahead.
no, that's a process question. Chris is the attorney, but I'll tell you, a denial only means that it requires a supermajority vote of the council.
Actually, on site plans, it doesn't.
So you
So,
should ask the attorney.
rezonings and final plats would, but under our code, a recommendation of denial doesn't affect, so it still could be passed with a
Okay.
simple majority.
For the
It's
city
sort of
council.
unique for a site plan.
And then just to
But-
maybe, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
And then just to maybe clarify process, I think, we work with Axiom a lot, and on a lot of projects, have a great relationship with that company. And, we are not the designers of projects. We are the reviewers of projects. Therefore, we should not be the designers. And our interaction with the client and their connection with us as Axiom has been that, yes, you have to modify the site development plan that exists before you can do anything with it. But we did not recommend this option as the conceptual plan for them. That's not a recommendation that we would have made. It would be inappropriate for us to do that. Now, we can always talk about code and how things might fit code and how things might not fit code, but this is not a recommendation of the city on the far right here. That would be inaccurate.
And likewise, there is nothing in front of us that we can conditionally vote on. There's nothing that says if we put this one-story building in, will you approve?
That's a process question I can't answer.
I mean, unless you were to conditionally approve it, conditionally approve it on a site plan to come in the future, and if that doesn't come within a date certain, that it would revert back to it's messy. And I guess at the end of the day, I think Brett's his statement that all that's before you is whether to take this out. I would agree with that. And that's all that's before you. You don't know what's going to come in the future. But I think also what I was hearing is that something might work there. But, and then they can bring the amended, this site plan would have to be amended for anything to be built there. And if there's something that can come as a package deal to have an amendment and a new site plan, I think that could, in theory, work. It's right now, we have a concept plan that seems problematic from what I'm gathering, from what I've heard from the commission. But, so that's where we are.
Chris, this is Ann. I want to ask a little bit of a clarification. So when I look at the initial part of the case as it was typed up for us, it tells me that the petitioner is asking to remove and potentially develop a detention area that's a required part of the site development plan. So that detention area, that lot 2, is required as the site development plans stands right now. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. And so if we were to agree to their request, then we're agreeing that they could develop something in that lot 2. And it would be up to us to determine whether or not it was developed in a way that we were comfortable with.
Correct.
If we don't do that, then as it stands right now, lot 2 has to stay as a detention area and look like what we're seeing today.
Right. That's what I was kind of trying to get at, is that, and then it's sort of fuzzy, but any condition, if there was any conditional approval, would have to be on a site plan on lot 2 and potentially outlot F that would come to you in the future, that would have to meet all of the requirements of our code. And if that doesn't happen, if something doesn't happen that meets, that is approved by, recommended by you and approved by council, then this site plan then would revert back to this site plan. That would be the only way of any sort of conditional approval going forward today. Alternatively, it would have to come back with a new request for an amended site plan and a new future site plan on lot 2.
I'm wondering if the commission wants staff to work with the developer and Axiom to bring this back to you. And maybe I think Commissioner Ganaway said, this is tripping me up. Is that an option?
Certainly an option is always for the commission to request to postpone. And
A deferral?
it would be if the issue comes from the commission, it would be a request or a motion to postpone until your next regularly scheduled meeting. The request for deferral would come from the applicant, and they would have that ability to make that request as well.
I think it's.
Let me throw in a comment too, before we get to that point. I feel compelled to
Go ahead, Ray.
address a couple things. One, counsel for the petitioner made reference to a pattern of development. From my perspective, the pattern of development has led to that open space, and that's the direction it's gone, not to increase the density. The pattern of development is decreasing the density, because we started with the concept plan, which was a concept plan, not an approved site plan, and we moved to the middle plan, which is what it was. So it actually, the pattern is less intensity from my perspective. And so that we're seeing differently. And I also feel compelled to address what, and maybe I misinterpreted, and I'd love to have clarification if I did, but what I heard was essentially a threat from the council that said, if we don't approve it, we're going to keep that ugly, not very good looking detention ditch there. So wouldn't you rather have a better looking building than that ugly ditch? And tell me if I misread that perspective.
I heard the same thing, Roy.
So did I.
Yeah, and I frankly am offended by it. And let me just add to that while I'm on that emotion. I'll tell you a little story. She passed away this past July, my 92-year-old mother, and she lived at the Fountains. I'll call it a competitor of this facility next door there. And we would take her out on rides every Sunday, and she loved to see what the competition was coming around, because there was all the talk in the halls about all these facilities coming online. So we would regularly take her through the one at 53rd and Middle Road and the one over here. And one of her comments, my little 92-year-old mother, was, "What a mess this construction site is." And I take that kind of threat I heard very seriously, because in all the developments, and I drive all over Bettendorf and look at all the developments, this one has been, frankly, a pigsty. Construction debris in the street, sloppy looking. It's embarrassing. And I'm concerned when I hear counsel for the petitioner say, well, if you don't approve it, it's going to look ugly like it does. And I'll just tell you for the record, that did not land well.
So this is counsel for the petitioner. I'll just tell you that wasn't my intent. So if you remember the conversation during the staff presentation, one of the questions from the commissioners was, well, is this in its final state? Is this how it's going to look? And I believe Mark said, no, it's not in its final position, and there still needs to be work done on it. My point was simply that there is no obligation for the petitioner to do anything on that, to spruce it up, if you will, to make it look. My point was to clarify that comment, that this could be pretty close to what it looks like in its finished state. So that was my point. And in terms of the construction site, I don't know what's happened from the beginning. I don't know if you were able to attend the opening of this, the senior living facility, the Quartet. But I think if you go over there and take a look, you'll find that it's first class. And it's probably the nicest facility in the Quad Cities, and that's consistent with what Nelson does and with their reputation, so.
Noted.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone in the audience? Any further comments from the commissioners?
I would support what Mark was suggesting from whether it's deferment, whatever. I'm not in a position today to remove that acreage from the current plan without a better vision of what potentially will be going in there.
Okay, so are you making a motion to postpone?
Well, I understood Chris had said that it had to come from the petitioner
That's a deferral.
We can post.
or deferral. Whichever is functional, that if somebody says vote today, I'll vote today. But I think there's a better way through this with some more discussion.
So we can vote, we can. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll move to postpone case 22-097.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Item is postponed. All right, on to commission updates.
Nothing to report this, at the moment. We are working on our comprehensive plan. Our schedule has been a little bit delayed, just in getting things up and running, and we've been honestly quite busy at a staff level, so we're not as far along as we'd like to be, but we will be meeting this spring and starting that process in earnest with you.
All right. With that, meeting's adjourned.